Before we get into this video, I have a couple quick things. Firstly, I've been moving around some reptile enclosures, which is why there's just random stuff stacked on each other. I'll be fixing that later. Also, unfortunately, I broke one of my tripods, so you can see it kind of in frame because I just have it taped together. Usually I could fix that, but I can't right now. Also, I was recently in a Noah's Ark Exotics video, so we went to talk about YouTube and reptiles and some other stuff. So you can go check that video out, and then once you do, you can come back here and we can get started. So today we're talking about somewhat of a touchy subject, and that is impaction, but I'm going to be talking about more of the facts about it and not the opinion. So firstly, some of the opinions is that you shouldn't use things like sand and calci-sand and other loose substrates that your animals can't digest because it can get basically built up into their system, and that can lead to health problems or eventually kill them. Other people say that it's just fine. Some say that it depends and it can happen, and there's just all sorts of things. But I'm going to be going over what impaction is and how your reptiles get it, and then maybe this can help you form an opinion on whether you should use certain loose substrates or not. So let's say we've got our poorly drawn lizard that lives on sand and it eats crickets. So I throw in some crickets, which is going to be the pennies, and then the lizard eats the crickets off of its substrate. Let's say that that's sand. So the crickets are going to come through, but I might catch a few pieces of substrate with that. And then as it eats, more of the food goes through the crickets, but it also keeps picking up pieces of sand. Then this food continues going, and then in the stomach, we've got our mix of basically grains of sand and then the crickets. These crickets are going to digest just fine. So let's take these out. And then over a few hours, or I don't know how long it takes animals to digest, that will turn into this lovely mush, which you can probably guess what it is. The sand, however, isn't going to digest. It's still going to be in here. This mush moves along through its system, and then it comes out as what we get to scoop up, which is their poop. And then in there, you can actually see a few grains of sand slip through, because although it might not digest, some of it can still make it through the system just fine, and it'll poop it out as full pieces of sand or whatever substrate it is. However, you can see there's quite a bit of sand left over in the stomach, and if this goes unnoticed, it can keep building up as the animal is eating more crickets to where this is basically clogged up. Now this happened kind of quickly because it had been eating directly off of sand whenever it had meals. So this built up pretty quickly, and this could have been maybe over a few weeks period or a few months period. What some people do is they feed their animal either in a bowl or in a separate container or through tongs so that they don't end up actually ingesting any of the sand. This is a really good thing, and it decreases the risk, and they're going to get a lot more food than they are sand. However, animals can simply get little grains of sand from different places. So leopard geckos, for example, they kind of tend to just lick everything. So they might lick their substrate and get just a few grains of sand in there. The food is going to pass it on and then of course turn into that stuff. Then the next day, maybe the gecko is eating out of its bowl, but it accidentally kicked up a couple pieces of sand, so one gets through and gets stuck in the food and then goes into the stomach. Then maybe next week, it happens to lick something on its enclosure, getting a few more grains of sand into its system, which is also going to go in there. Again, it can pass some of this, so a couple of these might move on. Now this is maybe over a few weeks period or a few months period, and that's really slow to only be like 4 grains of sand. But over a number of years, maybe like 5 years, this could eventually build up and keep building up to where you don't notice it because it's still not very much. But the problem is you're not going to notice it until it's just about too late. So say maybe this is like 7 years after you've had it, and it's been living on the sand or whatever substrate it can't digest. And this is really built up, and there's really not very much you can do other than do surgery if it's really a lot like this. This can cause constipation and all sorts of problems to where it can't digest its food and can't eat, and eventually this can lead to its death. However, whether this happens over a few weeks because it's eating directly off of sand, or over a few years because it's been tongue feeding or whatever, it isn't very common. Tons of people keep their animals, like lizards, on sand and gravel and walnut shells and other substrates they can't digest, and many have been just fine throughout their whole lives. However, that doesn't mean there aren't impaction cases, and there's quite a few. You can find many people that have had the problem, and you can even find images of just what the impaction is like, because many people's animals have gone through the process of getting impaction either because they were eating on sand or because they were tongue fed and might lick at their sand, or just little bits got knocked into their food or water, and so on, to where they slowly ingested little bits of that substrate that they can't really pass and just builds up inside their system over time. So I think I said I was going to avoid putting my opinions in this video, but I'm kind of going to anyway. And in my opinion, you should really avoid loose substrates that they can't digest. And this is for two reasons. Firstly, because although there is a higher chance that your animal will be fine if it's living on a substrate like this, there is still that chance there, and I don't like taking the risk. And then if you do find that your animal's impacted, you might have to take it to the vet if it's pretty severe, and not only is that going to be dangerous, but even if your animal gets through the process just fine at the vet, it's going to be pretty expensive. And if you notice it too late, there might not be very much that you can do to help save your animal. The second reason is because there's plenty of really good alternatives to these loose substrates. There are actually plenty of loose substrates that you can use that they'll be just fine on. For example, Eco-Earth. I don't know if you can see it, but Olive is in Eco-Earth right there. Right now she's actually burrowed in it, and it can help keep her warm or cool depending on the temperature. And it also just looks pretty nice, and it can make her feel pretty comfortable. But the cool thing is Eco-Earth is completely natural, and they can digest it just fine. It's still good to feed them in a bowl or from tongs just to avoid as much, but oh, well, this is Eco-Earth right here. But even if they do ingest this Eco-Earth, they'll be just fine, they can digest it, and they'll pass it without a problem. The certain types of softer wood, like I've got, I think this is called lizard litter in here. It's basically wood shavings, and again, you don't really want them to ingest this, but if they do, they can digest it and pass it just fine. You can also go with things like reptile carpet, which I have in my leopard gecko right here, or even just paper towel depending on the species. I've talked about these different substrates in other videos, so I won't actually go over them in this. But hopefully that makes sense on basically where impaction comes from and how it works, and why I think you should avoid the certain loose substrates that they can't digest. In the comments, make sure to leave your opinions on using certain substrates that can potentially cause impaction, whether that's your opinions or your experiences with it, or whatever else, because I'd love to be able to see them, along with letting other people see certain things that I might have missed or not have known about. But yeah, that's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed or got something out of it. And that's it. I'm Alex, and thanks for watching.